One of the most valuable things I learned as a guy was I had a gay professor in college.
Wait, what?
At a time when openly gay folks still weren't out of line, who became one of my favorite professors and was a great guy and would call me out when I started saying stuff that was ignorant.
What?
You need that.
Wait. What?
So what do we say to the Emmas of the world? How do we sort of start thinking as a society about helping mothers raise sons, because they're doing it alone, and we're being told that we don't have what it takes to give boys all of what they need?
Well, look, I think you started hinting at it. As somebody who was raised by a single mom, not perfectly, but that unconditional love as a start is the right one. I do think, though, thinking about raising boys in the same way you're thinking about raising daughters, which is how do you make them good, responsible people who know how to function and know how to...
So this clip has been going viral, or this interview has been going viral, where Barack is talking to Michelle about raising young men and what young men need in society. And I'm very interested in hearing what he has to say about what young men need in society. Because Barack Obama climbed his ranks up. He went to Harvard University. He became the president of the United States. He's an objectively successful man, and he lived a pretty, I want to say, good life. He raised a solid family. He stayed in one marriage. He did everything by the book. So what do young men need, Barack? I would love to hear it from your perspective. Please make sure you like and subscribe. And my name is LFR Jojo. Let's continue.
Understand themselves well enough that they can navigate this really complicated world, and setting high expectations. So there are a lot of these things that apply to boys and girls. I do think that there are some particular issues with boys that as a society we're not addressing. I do think as a society, we have to create more structures for boys and men to have guidance, rituals, frameworks, encouragement, to be able to meet a wide range of role models so that whatever their inclinations, they can see a path to success that isn't just sports or money. Making a lot of money, and so that's on all of us together. What I would say to Emma would be, in your community, even if you have a wonderful male partner who's in the house, I think it still would be good to find assets in the community, people in the community, friends in your community, places of worship, community organizations, what have you, where there are a bunch of men who can be sort of elders to boys. And so they're not just looking at one.
I will say this. One thing I like that Barack Obama said just now is that young boys are pursuing sports, or he implied they're pursuing sports and entertainment over everything else. And I do think that's a huge issue, because if you go to any young boy, and I think sports are great. I think young boys should be in sports. I played basketball for my entire childhood. It was a very good character building thing to do. But the problem is when young boys are putting all their eggs in one basket. For example, you have every young boy wanting to go to the NBA, or wanting to go to the NFL, or wanting to go to the NHL. And it's okay, like, to have a dream, like, oh, what if I get good enough to go? Like, that's a dream. But when you're doing everything in your power to pursue an entertaining aspect or a sports aspect, you are ignoring things that you may actually be good at. Yeah, like, for example, the young boy who's naturally talented at building things with his hands, or who's naturally talented at mathematics, may never even understand that or even know that, because he's been chasing a basketball his entire life, or he's been chasing a football his entire life. And he may fail at that and think he is a failure because he's not on a a national sports level, or he's not the biggest streamer, the biggest YouTuber out there. He may live his entire life and think he's a failure. And I don't think that's a good trait to have in a large group of young men.
Particular role model, but many. And one of the things when Michelle and I first started dating and I'd go over to your guys' house, one of the things I loved was just, seeing all your uncles and your cousins. And there were a bunch of different kinds of men. Mm-hmm. There were men that were kind of soft-spoken, and then there were men that were loud, and there were men who were engineers, and then there were men who were police officers, or they drove a jitney cab. Yeah. Right. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of times boys need is not just exposure to one guy.
Mm-hmm. One dad.
No matter how good the dad
is. He can't be everything.
He can't be everything. And that boy may need somebody to give the boy some perspective on the dad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, this is a really interesting thing to say, considering that one of the subtitles in this video is Barack on growing up without a father. And a big issue in the Black community is a lot of boys are growing up without a father. So the fact that he's touching on boys needing multiple role models, it's a little strange. And the reason why it's strange is because earlier, and I didn't watch this segment yet, but the subtitle is Barack on growing up without a father. So it seems to me boys need their fathers more. But this is kind of implying that they need their fathers less in a way. But that's not the issues that we're having, especially in the Black community, or especially for young boys, or even for yourself. Your issue was that your father wasn't around. And a lot of Black boys' issues is that their fathers aren't around. It's not that their fathers are around too much and they don't have any other male influences. It's that they don't have a father figure. That's the biggest problem. That was actually, ironically, your problem.
One of the most valuable things I learned as a guy was I had a gay professor in college.
Wait, what?
At a time when openly gay folks still weren't out of line. Who became one of my favorite professors and was a great guy and would call me out when I started saying stuff that was ignorant.
What?
Mm-hmm. You need that.
Wait. What? He's dead serious. He's dead serious, bro. Hold up. I'm sorry, y'all. How does anybody need that? Hold up. Maybe I'm not hearing this right. Hold up.
In college. Give the boys some perspective on the dad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
One of the most valuable things I learned as a guy was I had a gay professor in college. At a time when openly gay folks still weren't out of line. Who became one of my favorite professors and was a great guy and would call me out when I started saying stuff that was ignorant. You need that to show empathy and kindness. And by the way, you need that person in your friend group so that if you then have a boy who's gay or non-binary or what have you, they have somebody that they can go, okay, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah.
Right. So that I think is creating that community. I know it's corny, but that's what they need.
And we talk a lot about what we had with our mother and father, right? And a lot of times but we really did have a big community of people in our lives.
Right.
So this section of the video is titled "Helping Boys Access Emotion," and the entire tone of this video is that boys need multiple role models and boys need better influences in society. I kind of expected something different from Barack in this. I expected something different because in our society, a big problem is that young boys have no real direction. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have an influence that tells them you need to be disciplined. You need to be structured. You need to be ready to chase your dreams relentlessly. You need to be ready to do the hard things. And the hard things are waking up, going to work, studying when you don't feel like it, raising a family, being there for your wife, being there for your children, being there for your brother and sister. That's what they need to hear. We need to build strong young men. And that's what society is lacking right now. That's why a lot of our issues are so prominent. That's actually, ironically, why the Conservative Party became so popular, is because they just didn't ignore boys. And even in giving advice to young boys, he's still ignoring them. And what do I mean by that? This video is about helping young men be heard, helping young men regulate their emotion or access their emotional needs or access their needs, or giving them advice on how they can live good, healthy, sustainable lives. This is what this video is about. And even in a video specifically tailored to young men, he's focusing on the LGBTQ plus community. And I don't want to go too hard on Barack Obama, but it's just disappointing that even in a video specifically tailored towards young men trying to find a way, you can't even focus fully on them. You're Barack Obama. You went to Harvard University. You became the president of the United States for 2 straight terms, and you were extremely popular. You have an extremely successful family. You have a wife and 2 daughters who both went off and got college degrees and became, I don't know, I think they're successful. I don't know. But on paper, you're living a lot of young men's dream. You have a family, you have money, you have success, you have prestige, you have everything that young boys can have. And rather than talking about how you got there, what it took for you to get there, the level of discipline, the level of structure, the level of confidence, the level of prayer that you had to pray, rather than talking about anything that you had to actually do in your real life, this is what you say. And I'm not sitting here bashing any community at all. It just feels like even in your monologue, you're ignoring the actual needs of young men. Yes, young men need role models, of course. But what young men really need is for you to tell them you need to stop abandoning your families. You need to tell that 21-year-old, 22-year-old young man, you need to raise your kids and be there for them. You need to tell that 15-year-old, put down the basketball. If you're not 6'2", you're not going to the NBA. Pick up a book. Pick up a trade. Learn how to build stuff. That's what they need to hear from you. But this is what you say. And it's just, it made me laugh at first because I really couldn't believe it. I honestly couldn't believe it. But it's just, it's shocking if I'm being honest.
And
which is true for so many. That's the story for so many boys growing up these days.
I mean, in that sense, I think as unusual as my background was, that part of it isn't that unusual, right? It was kind of typical. Mm-hmm. And I think a couple of things happened. Now, I was loved, and that's a starting point, right? The people who were around me cared about me, and I never felt an absence of that. And the second thing I think you learn to do when you're in that situation is, all right, I got to sort of, I have to adopt role models. I got to piece them together and get a sense of, all right, what does it mean to be a man? Now, later on, as I got older, you'd start recognizing that some of the ideas about manhood that were being given to us back in the 70s and the 80s, not all of them were great, right?
Can I ask you both to talk about what manhood meant for you? What it meant for you when you were little boys coming up, what you thought it was, and what you then came to understand it to actually be?
Well, I don't remember maybe when I was a really young child, other than the idea that guys were strong, they didn't whine, they were tough.
They were expected to go to work.
They worked
and provide,
right,
and protect.
Yes,
I mean, and I think back about that. I think when I'm thinking about dad as a role model, I remember the fact that here you have a man who has MS and he's getting up and he's going to work absolutely every day.
Right.
And he is not complaining. That's another thing. Men didn't complain.
You don't complain.
Then.
You're stoic.
You were, I love that word, stoic. Coach Carmody used to use that all the time, stoic. But our dad never complained. He never got up. He had a sense of humor. That was another thing that you learned from guys, is that you needed a sense of humor. Right. But one of the most important things that I remember is that you got along.
Got along
you
in
got
the
along,
world, period.
You got along with the other guys you were with. You got along with your teammates. You got along with your coworkers. Nobody wanted to be considered a jerk.
That is true. Some of the definitions of manhood, I think, were negative, right? You don't whine. You don't cry.
No emotion.
You're not a jerk.
But that's what a man is. That's what it is. Barack Obama, and I hate to say this, but I have to say this. Barack Obama, I've never seen you cry. I've never seen a tear fall from your eyes. And if people were to describe you as a president, you were very calm. You were very stoic. You weren't very emotional. You didn't really curse. You always kept a clean-shaven face. You were very calm-mannered, but you were still sending them drone strikes overseas. You were still handling business. You were still deporting people. But no one would have ever known this because you were always very calm. You were always very stoic, like a hawk. So when I hear you say these are negative aspects of a man, it's funny because you lived these aspects. You are a provider for your family. You were there for your children. They went to the best private schools in DC. You were every negative trait that you just said was negative. So it really confuses me, which now you're saying it's like a negative thing when you embody these things as the president. You were very hardworking. You didn't complain much. Maybe I'm just delusional, though.
I do like the thing you brought up, though, about being a protector, because for some reason, that part of it, I think, appealed to me. And at its best, it then counterbalanced the idea of being strong, right? Like, you're strong not to pick on people, right? Not to be a bully, not to dominate others. Instead, it's strength in order to protect, right? And for me, a lot of being a man was being self-sufficient, right? The idea of I can handle myself and make my way through the world. And I tell this story, you've heard this story, and sometimes people kind of freak out. Fairly early on, because
I do freak out over this.
Because I was living in Indonesia. I'd fly from Hawaii to Indonesia on my own if I was visiting my grandparents, even at the age of 8. And it was cool because stewardess was there. She'd grab you and put you in the seat and give you a little, if it was Pan Am, they'd have a little
flight pin.
Flight.
We don't have time to discuss or watch the entirety of the clip, but I will say this. In order to be a man, I'm just going to be honest with any man watching this or any young man younger than me watching this. You do have to be stoic. You do have to be strong. You do have to be independent in certain ways. The problem comes in where young men feel like they only can be strong or they only can be independent. And that's the problem. If you have questions, if you have concerns, you need to reach out to someone. Because sometimes you don't know what to do. And that's okay because you're human. But the fact still remains. If you plan on leading a family, if you plan on being the one that people come to when they have a struggle, when your wife has a struggle, when your sisters have a struggle, when your little brothers or little cousins, or even if your parents have a struggle, if you want to be that leader, you have to be strong. It's non-negotiable. It's the same thing as if we're electing a president. I don't care what anyone says. No one wants a weak president. I don't care who's voting. And it's the same thing if you're leading your household. But that does not mean that you cannot depend on others. It doesn't even mean you can't rely on others. You can still do these things. But a leader is a leader at the end of the day. And that if that's what you want to be, that's what comes with it. And I'm just being 100% honest. Nonetheless, my name is Elifar Jojo. Please make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one.